Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and will Deadpool be the fifth banana to a team-up of Marvel heroes, including Channing Tatum Gambit and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? Crazier things have happened, because we just got this amazing Variety Actors on Actors interview between Andrew Garfield and Ryan Reynolds, where they covered a lot of ground, including both of their careers and the way both of them, as Deadpool and Peter Parker Spider-Man, have been kind of redemptive characters to make surprise cameos connected in the MCU now. And this interview included some amazing reveals, including a pitch for a version of Deadpool 3 that would have been a team up between Wade Wilson and the hunter who shot Bambi's mother. So in this video, I'm going to go through all the big highlights from this interview to kind of talk about what we can expect for the future of both of these actors and their iconic characters. And yes, I believe there are futures for them. And before we get into it, if you love New Rockstars and want to help support what we do, we have a channel membership now. We're starting small when it comes to the perks, but if you are able to and want to rock some custom emojis in the comments of our videos, a membership is just a really great way to help us keep doing what we're doing here. Okay, the first discovery I made upon watching this Variety Actors on Actors interview between Ryan Reynolds and Andrew Garfield was Ryan Reynolds connecting the dots on something that I noticed about the evolving Deadpool suit, and specifically Ryan Reynolds' physical performance within that suit. Check it out.
I have a question for you about the Deadpool suit, because it's evolved since you know you first slung it on to now, and I'm just curious about the evolution of that.
Well, the suits are tough, but to me, the suits are freeing in that I find it's clown work. I have to rely on my voice for micro facial expressions. I rely on my body for more macro expressions.
So
and all of that comes from Jack Benny and Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, Chaplin, and Marcel. And framing, static. Lock that sucker off. It's always gonna be funnier to enter the frame than to find me and bring me in.
It's so funny, it's such a simple thing that just is.
Okay, so this clip gets into some like actor craft details that you may or may not be interested in, but one specific upgrade that Ryan Reynolds made to his performance as Deadpool in the Deadpool and Wolverine film was the importance of like clowning. It's not just like excessive violence and physical pratfalling. It's like the way that he can move his body to specifically deliver a joke. Like in Deadpool and Wolverine, the scene where he meets the worst Wolverine in the bar and he just kind of leans in at the bar side to be, hey, Peanut. Like he understands that Deadpool is intruding on every shot that he enters. That there is a perfectly normal and reasonable shot that Deadpool just crashes by a stupid red and black face with the white eyes entering. That's Deadpool's relationship with every comic panel that he enters, and that should be Deadpool's relationship with every cinematic frame that he enters. But then Ryan Reynolds got into this idea of Deadpool's psychology as a character.
There's always got to be a why, you know, and Deadpool wears the suit, you know, because he's in a slightly militarized shame spiral. Wolverine, the suit that he's wearing is a hair shirt. It's a penance. He's wearing his shame.
Nice,
So we now have a visual totem.
That's cool.
When he's, you know, at the end of the film, when he's out of the suit, you feel this like, like he's unburdened himself of this bag of rocks that he's carrying.
You know, watching Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like I understood this on a nonverbal level, and it's just interesting to hear him talk about it. Because specifically in Deadpool and Wolverine, you can see how they bring back the character's military origin from that moment when Deadpool meets Happy Hogan in the MCU, and he says this.
No, yes, of course. I was Special Forces, but I was team leader, founder, really, of X-Force. Sadly, they all perished in action.
And if you think about it, all of Deadpool's jokes in the movie really stem from that backstory. It's why he respects Captain America so much and salutes him in the TVA, because Steve Rogers is another vet who feels out of place in a pop culture driven world. And Steve Rogers tries to keep up with that world by keeping lists of pop culture references and by saying things like, I understood that reference. Deadpool as a character is someone who says, I understood that reference, and takes it to the extreme and has to get every reference and prove to us that he gets our pop culture world that we come from. And I think that's why when Chris Evans shows up in The Void, Deadpool wanted him to be Steve Rogers so badly and was just kind of disappointed when he was Johnny Storm.
Oh my God, he's gonna say it!
Say what?
Avengers Clemons!
Sorry, what now?
And I think all of this could inform a future dialogue between Wade Wilson and Steve Rogers if the two team up in Secret Wars, as it's looking increasingly likely that they will. Ryan Reynolds' words in this interview also inform the arc of Wolverine in the movie and why it's so cathartic when his suit rips to shreds down there in the deatomization chamber. It speaks to like Marvel Studios' general prerogative when they bring back these fan favorite moments. Like Kevin Feige wants to bring them back so we get to see them again, but each director wants to tear it to pieces shortly after we see see it. There is an unburdening that Hugh Jackman gets to convey by not having to wear that suit. He also gets to show off the, physical prep he did to come back as his character. Now, Ryan Reynolds also teases the one line that Disney forced him to remove from the script.
Disney and Marvel, they were so supportive from the jump. I had one line that Bob Iger wanted out of the movie, and we took it out.
Which was?
I'll never repeat it. I promised I wouldn't.
Now, we know what this line was because the shooting script for this movie was revealed, I guess for script award consideration, on page 59, the second blue revision, dated April 17, 2024, meaning this was a pretty late draft, the shooting script that they submitted for award consideration and WGA credit, arbitration, that sort of thing. The line came in the moment where they met Channing Tatum's Gambit and Wesley Snipes' Blade, and Jennifer Garner as Elektra, and Deadpool was specifically pissed off that they couldn't get Magneto in the movie. The original line was this.
Now Disney gets cheap? It's like Pinocchio jammed his face in my ass and started lying like crazy.
But the line in the shooting script was this. We can't even afford one more X-Men. Disney is so cheap, I can barely breathe with all the Mickey Mouse in my throat. I know, whoa. But because this script was dated April 17, 2024, that tells us that this change from Bob Iger was one of the last changes that Ryan Reynolds made to the movie. It was late in the post-production process when they were doing various ADR pickups, and the version that we heard in the movie was probably a pickup that they did late. And that's why when you go through and Zapruder this frame by frame, you can see Deadpool's mouth saying something completely different in that moment.
Now Disney gets cheap? It's like Pinocchio jammed his face in my ass and started lying like crazy.
So now we're gonna move on to some other pitches for Deadpool and Wolverine that Ryan Reynolds apparently shared with Disney.
First pitch I had for Marvel and Kevin Feige 5 years ago was a Deadpool and Wolverine movie in the Rashomon style. They said no. I pitched the most idiotic movie. One was a Sundance movie I pitched them. No special effects, no conflict. There might be a scene
Just
like any good
around.
Sundance movie where it's a 4-minute oneer of me taking a shit or pissing or something that just tells the audience this is raw and vulnerable and we're going there. And then I pitched one where I'm like, it's a two-hander with me and the hunter who shot Bambi's mom, which was, their answer was, we don't touch Bambi, Ryan.
Okay, so let's talk about what we mean by Deadpool versus Wolverine as a Rashomon type story. Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, one of the most important films ever made because it was one of the first that dealt with this idea of subjective storytelling, where through a different character's point of view, you see a different version of events. Now, what drives me crazy about various showrunners and TV writers and filmmakers and actors and just media critics talking about Rashomon is they misunderstand it, I think, as just retelling a story through alternate perspectives, just from another character's point of view. But to be full Rashomon on something, it means different things happen each time we revisit the story. It's not just putting the camera in a different place and showing it from a different perspective, while really objectively the same thing actually just unfolds. You have completely different dialogue, completely different blocking, completely different costumes in some cases. The characters are completely different people even. Like Rashomon was a story of a sexual assault that in some versions of the story was not even a sexual assault. So again, it's not just putting the camera slightly further back so you can see different layers of things. It would mean, for example, like Deadpool and Wolverine would be on trial in some way, maybe in front of the TVA or in front of the Watcher or in front of the Living Tribunal, and then they're each talking about some incident that they were involved with. In Deadpool's version, maybe he was the hero and it was like a justified revenge story where they needed to save someone and kill everyone in there. But when we see it from Wolverine's perspective, it was not justified and they were the villains of that. And it was like an extraction mission gone to shit, and that completely different things were said, and the villain said very different things, and that Deadpool is just remembering it differently to mythologize himself as the hero of that story. Now, is that a billion-dollar movie? Probably not. And you can imagine Kevin Feige being like, that's not exactly the way we do things here, but it does make like an interesting 3-act story that could work as like a Deadpool Christmas special or a what if episode. Now, I think it's interesting that Ryan Reynolds uses the term Sundance movie because Sundance is not a genre of film. All types of genres go through Sundance and are approved through that process and are distributed afterwards. But I think what he's referring to are what, the industry thinks of when you say Sundance. Things like Christopher Nolan's Memento or Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, Little Miss Sunshine, or Whiplash. These kind of indie movie darlings that have wide appeal for whatever reason, but obviously movies that don't have a lot of effects, but have have a kind of high concept appeal to them, or just a very strong relationship at the core of them that sometimes puts performances above like huge effect film. But I think specifically Ryan Reynolds is referring to a movie that he made called Buried, which was a Blacklist movie script favorite, where Ryan Reynolds played a military contractor who was buried alive in a war zone as part of a blackmail operation. And we spend the full 90 minutes with him in that box with a cell phone, just trying to call people to try to free him or talk to his captors. In Ryan Reynolds' case, he's talking about where we have a 4-minute oneer of Wade Wilson taking a shit. And actually, we see a version of that in the movie announcement video that he made, and he and Blake Lively's New York State home, where you can see Deadpool in the dusty gray suit that he wore at the end of Deadpool 2, literally sitting on a toilet reading a specific issue of a Wolverine comic.
When my family gets together for the holidays, we play games, and the games we play the most are the ones we can just play, you know, like Doomlings! Doomlings is a card game that takes 5 minutes to learn. You're trying to score the most points before the end of the world by playing cards from your hand called traits, and every card has these fun little monster type guys on them. Every round is called an age. Occasionally an age will introduce a catastrophe, and the game ends when the third catastrophe strikes. There, now you know how to play Doomlings. Literally, it's that simple to explain. And the rules are on the cards themselves, so if you forget, you know, Doomlings has you covered. It is so fun. I started playing it with friends over the summer, and I am so excited to show it to my family. The whole game is small enough to toss into a carry-on without losing any space, making it perfect for a Thanksgiving weekend add-on. You can get Doomlings in retail stores like Walmart or Target, but if you scan the QR code or click the link in the description and use code Rockstar20, you'll get 20% off your order at doomlings.com.
But then he mentions this two-hander with Deadpool and the hunter who killed Bambi's mom. Now, he may just be joking in this instance, but it does truly sound like Ryan Reynolds was just really tickled about the opportunity to embrace this new Disney IP and its connection to the Disney studio franchises and setting up these really dark takes on Disney IP. And we have to wonder, who did he have in mind to play the hunter who killed Bambi's mom? I think based off of Ryan Reynolds' other films that he's made, the good and the bad, I think he's talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Specifically, Johnson did an SNL sketch that was very similar to this idea. But then things got pretty interesting when Andrew Garfield asked Ryan Reynolds about the future of Deadpool and Wolverine as a franchise.
What does the future hold?
I honestly, I'm not making this up. My feeling is that character works very well in two ways. One is scarcity and surprise. So
yes,
it's been 6 years since the last one, and part of the reason is that it swallows my whole life. Like so I don't know what the future of Deadpool will be, but I do know that Sean and I made the movie to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and be a complete experience instead of a commercial for another one. Deadpool's a supporting character much more than he is a main, the center. But you can't center him unless you take everything away from him. You have to like create a situation where he's so much the underdog. And I don't think I can do that again. So I think if he comes back, it's going to be in a someone else's movie. Channing Tatum was so excited to play Gambit, and I would happily be the fifth banana in his movie or anyone else's. I love the currency of, you did this in Spider-Man No Way Home so beautifully, where you're weaving like DNA strands, culture, and a cultural conversation with a narrative in a movie. And it's a very, like, the power of redemption is something that it's like being in an airplane trying to hit a bullseye in the Grand Canyon. Like, it's just a very difficult thing to, and you guys in that movie, I burst into tears, everybody burst into tears because you have all that cultural currency and cachet. Deadpool and Wolverine, the best feelings I've ever had is sitting in Hall H at Comic-Con and watching Wesley Snipes cross the frame. And what's happening, and that people are crying, there's some people wailing, and what's happening is that they realize in an instant, without maybe intellectualizing it this exact way, but that they desperately missed this person, but they didn't know they missed it.
Aha! So Ryan Reynolds is getting at here one of the most important parts of our jobs here in the YouTube space. We can fan cast all we want, but really to correctly theorize, I think we have to restrain ourselves a bit and really ask, what returning cameos do these filmmakers and actors have personal relationships with? And think that the fan base isn't bringing up enough. Maybe because the fan base doesn't think it's possible, or the fan base thinks that person belongs in a kind of creative jail still, that they haven't forgiven that person enough, but that the filmmakers believe deserve that forgiveness before the fans do, and that they, as people controlling these characters, can deliver the maximum surprise and maximum redemption for by just bringing them back. That's what he's referring to by Wesley Snipes. Fans weren't necessarily demanding to see Snipes again, but when we did, the roar was deafening. That's why my money is on James Marsden as Cyclops, showing up as the next, Kelsey Grammer Beast or Patrick Stewart Professor X in an upcoming MCU multiverse scene. Anyone else, like a Chris Evans Johnny Storm or John Krasinski Reed Richards, it's just gonna be like a quick cameo followed by an insane death. That's what they do when they feel like their hands are forced. It also informs the latest scoop that we talked about in a video last week. I think we were able to deduce that Ioan Gruffudd could show up in a Council of Reeds scene in Fantastic Four First Steps, and not just from our social media sleuthing and visual analysis of the shape of the actor's legs. Ioan Gruffudd's Reed Richards is another role that we all moved on from, and probably from the studio standpoint feels like this guy doesn't get his proper due. He's not a household name, but maybe he should be, and he is exactly the type of role that Ryan Reynolds is referring to, a character that not until we see him again will we have realized how much we missed him. And it's interesting to hear Ryan Reynolds, as he's talking to Andrew Garfield, seem almost defensive against critics who write off movies like Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine, which were, by the way, the two biggest movies commercially either of these actors have made, as being things like, cameo porn. And I think Reynolds is giving space for Andrew Garfield to bask in returns like this as true redemption in the cultural conversation for characters and their relationship to the fandom. Like, neither of the actors verbalize it specifically, but they are totally talking about how, for Ryan Reynolds, fans hated the Weapon 11 version of Deadpool and X-Men Origins Wolverine, and that's why he committed himself for the next decade of his life to getting the character right, even down to the point of illegally releasing test footage to force into existence the 2016 Tim Miller Deadpool with Fox. And for Andrew Garfield, fans turned against the 2014 The Amazing Spider-Man 2 film, and the industry almost prematurely swiftly moved on to the Tom Holland reboot in the MCU, and Andrew Garfield was kind of unfairly forgotten about. So him catching Zendaya in Spider-Man No Way Home gave fans that cathartic redemption we didn't know that we needed.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Are you okay?
And Reynolds and Garfield get into that here.
When you came back to that, how did that feel?
It's not that I missed it. It felt undone. It felt undone for me. It was just very like, you're invited to a party and then the party ends slightly like prematurely than you wanted it to end.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I've got to reckon with kind of being disinvited to this party. Mm-hmm. And that's when like the work happens, right? That's when you start to really deal with your own stuff and your own relationship to self, relationship to perception, relationship to validation or to inclusion, disclusion, but it's all inside job stuff. There's nothing to do with the outside. It's just like you and you. So I did all of
primal too.
Yeah, so it was like a few years of that kind of like soul work.
You were an amazing Spider-Man.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Amazing Spider-Man. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
That's very kind.
You were so fluid and fun.
Coming back and Amy Pascal reaching out and asking me about it, it was like, being re-welcomed into the party, and the pressure was on Tom. Tom had to hold that universe.
Is it like prison
together.
though, when you get into prison the first hour, you gotta shank the biggest guy, and you gotta do it fast, and you can't let him see it coming, right? But in this instance, Tom, he's not giant, but he's were you just like this fucking kid?
I was like, got you suckers, because like you invited me back to the party, but the plan all along was to absolutely undermine the whole process. Yeah. So, but also, it was a beautiful thing to genuinely feel like you're a support of a Spider brother, and I do mean that sincerely. Like, it was a genuinely lovely, and John Watts, such a great director, and he was so loose. Fun, yeah. He was so relaxed. I was like, so what are we gonna do about what's on the page? Because we need to work on it. I was like, yeah, we'll work on it. And it's like, okay, but when? It's like, well, we'll improvise a lot. I'm like, great, really?
But it was beautiful. Isn't the best thing in the world when you're in a situation on a movie, because movies I think are really interesting, and that they will talk to you. If you listen to them, they will speak to you, and they'll speak to you loudly.
Now, what's interesting is Variety's transcript in their text article weirdly quotes this exchange as Ryan Reynolds saying, "If I were Tom, I'd be angry," and that Andrew Garfield stole the movie. And that is not at all what either of them say when you watch the video. I have no idea where Variety got that, but hey, it was Variety's production. They can editorialize a freewheeling conversation how they choose. And hey, hey, maybe something was left out of the cut. But this further underlines how these Marvel actors and filmmakers look at these returning cameos. There has to be some unanswered question about the way they left the franchise, some unfulfilled need that bringing them back in a future crossover can cathartically resolve. Now, those needs can totally change over time, and that meta conversation is still being written. And for Reynolds and Deadpool and Wolverine, it's gonna be probably, well, did Deadpool really get to go after Disney as much as we all need him to? For Andrew Garfield coming back as Spider-Man possibly in the future, it's gonna be probably the responsibility he feels to revisit that conversation he had with Jamie Foxx's Electro.
You from Queens, you got that suit, you help a lot of poor people. I just thought you was gonna be black.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
I don't apologize. There's gotta be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there.
Like, could that inform the way Sony could bring back Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker as a mentor figure to a live-action Miles Morales? And what I love about this Variety Actors on Actors interview is the way both actors look at their careers, their relationships with the Marvel characters, with the media, with the industry, with the fans. These kind of team-ups can truly be willed into existence from interviews like this. Like, we see how both actors feel a sort of redemptive quest with both of their characters, where as younger actors, they eagerly said yes to opportunities without full control over how the character would be written or presented. And they felt particularly stung about letting fans down. But now they feel a bit more in control over their careers and their destinies and will not say yes to return to a role if it's just a cash grab for the studio. They need an opportunity to deliver a true comment to that meta conversation to fulfill an emotional need for themselves and for the character that they are associated with. Now for Deadpool, to hear Ryan Reynolds describe the character as a fifth banana, we just have to ask ourselves, and I ask you in the comments, who are the other four bananas? I think the five bananas are going to be Deadpool, Gambit, Wolverine, X-23, and either Blade or now maybe Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. Comment down below with your thoughts on all this. And yes, you can see I'm wearing our Agatha sigil hat. It's like my favorite thing that nerdriot.shop has put out this year. It makes an amazing holiday gift, and it's another great way to support new Rockstars. So grab one of these at nerdriot.shop. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.